to improve with a mission to improve the economic climate and expand business opportunities on Staten Island. We serve approximately 600 businesses representing nearly 20,000 employees. About 90% of our business members have 10 or fewer employees. Every major sector is represented in the chamber membership, with businesses ranging in size from mom and pop stores to large public corporations. The Borough of Staten Island is home to more than 12,000 businesses and approximately 500,000 residents. We help all borough businesses by providing access to the tools and resources they need to succeed. We also advocate to improve quality of life in many areas, transportation, infrastructure, job training, and are involved in many efforts to better our community. We are a community partner tonight for the Staten Island part of this initiative. The goal of PowerUp NYC study is to develop specific actions city government can take to move us away from an energy system dependent on dirty fossil fuels towards one that is equitable, sustainable, resilient, and affordable for all New Yorkers. It is important for Staten Island residents to get involved in shaping New York City's energy future and to have a voice. Our community has faced issues related to high energy bills, air quality, escalating development costs, power outages, and more, which is why it's important that you are here to tell us what issues you want NYC in New York City to prioritize. The goal of the community town hall is to introduce you to the PowerUp New York City Energy Planning Initiative, provide an overview of the proposed, and I repeat, it's proposed, so it's nothing is set in stone, research topics to be included in the study, and give you a chance to provide feedback and help shape the development of the plan. There will be a second round of community town hall meetings held in the fall in 2022, where the public will get another chance to participate in the development of the plan. Our agenda tonight breaks down into 9 research topics into 4 sections. After each section, we will have time for questions and comments. We invite you to share.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you slow down just a little bit for our interpreters?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
We invite you to share your thoughts on which topics the city should consider. Please use the raise hand function at this time, and we will call your name when it's your turn. We will be limiting comments to 1 minute so everyone has a chance to speak. There will be a survey shared at the end of the session, which we encourage you to share feedback with as well. And if you have any questions that you'd like to share during the segments, you can type into the chat message, and we'll either call on you as we proceed, or somebody will answer you directly in the chat. And just one last thing that I want to say before we get started is that this is basically still at the proposal stage. So the questions that you ask, think about, we're really looking for feedback from everybody, what incentives you would like to see, what concerns you might see in terms of financial constraints. We're not going to have all the answers tonight, but we hope to be able to get feedback from you that can help us, well, not help me, but help the mayor's office develop this plan. So I will turn the program over to Claudia Vijadlimen. She is the Energy Policy Advisor from the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice.
Great, thanks so much, Linda, and thanks everyone for attending tonight. So as Linda mentioned, my name is Claudia Vijadlimen. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an Energy Policy Advisor for the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, where I've spent the last 3 or so years supporting New York City's energy transition. So you'll hear us say the phrase just energy transition a bunch tonight. So I wanted to start off with what that means to me. So to me, a just energy transition means making sure all New York City residents can afford to pay their energy bills, making our buildings more energy efficient so they're more healthy and more comfortable to live in, investing in more resilient energy like backup battery storage that can provide backup power during emergencies and extreme weather events like we saw last summer during Hurricane Ida and other extreme heat events, shutting down our in-city power plants and achieving 100% clean electricity generated from sources like rooftop solar and offshore wind while maintaining a reliable grid, and making sure truck and bus fleets are electric and zero emissions. They don't pollute our streets anymore, and kids growing up in New York City don't have to take asthma as a given. So these are just some examples, but I guess at the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, where I work, our team is really dedicated to helping New Yorkers access the benefits of the energy transition, while also adapting our neighborhoods and preparing for the increasing impacts of climate change. Of course, we're already seeing those impacts today. And while our team has big ambitions for the work we want to do in partnership with New York City residents, I think it's important to recognize the legacy of past government actors who have marginalized Black, Brown, and low-income communities with practices like redlining and building highways that carve up neighborhoods and saddling low-income communities with polluting infrastructure like power plants and waste transfer station. I think our energy transition needs to prioritize righting the wrongs of the past and prioritize the needs of frontline communities. And to do that, it's really critical that community voices are centered front and center in shaping the energy transition planning process. So that's really informed the way that we've designed the PowerUp NYC initiative. And the success of that initiative will only be possible with close coordination with you all, our community partners, that like the Staten Island Chamber of Commerce and our 4 other community partners across the city, and you, the public, because your feedback will really enable us to develop a final report that comes out with specific commitments, which is the end goal of this whole project, is to develop specific commitments grounded in the needs of New York City communities that the city can advance in the next 4 years to achieve our energy transition goals. So it's really a privilege to partner with the Staten Island Chamber on this important work. We hope that through PowerUp NYC, we can start to rebuild that community trust and jumpstart transformational change on the energy front. So thanks all for being here today as part of that process. Looking forward to working with you and learning from you today. So feel free to unmute yourself with questions, add questions and comments in the chat. We really want to prioritize hearing from you today. So with that, I can pass it back over to Angel and we can dive in.
Yes, thank you so much, Claudia. Just before we get started, I wanted to let folks know, especially folks who join late, there is a button at the bottom. It looks like a circle, a little tennis ball. We do have interpretation languages today if folks wanted to listen in Spanish or Mandarin. What is PowerUp NYC? PowerUp NYC is a collaborative year-long effort to catalyze city government action to clean up our air, make energy bills more affordable, create good-paying jobs, and create opportunities for local, community-owned clean energy. Through PowerUp NYC, the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice is working with community leaders, energy experts, and New York City residents to develop policy solutions and actionable strategies city government will advance in the next 4 years to achieve a just energy transition by 2050. PowerUp NYC will work with city agency partners to co-create practical solutions that are aligned with the energy and equity mandates and targets of the city and state, reflective of an inclusive approach to energy leadership and governance, and grounded in the needs of New York City residents, prioritizing frontline communities and communities that have been historically underserved. We will begin with 2 building electrification research area studies. Building electrification, assessing the feasibility and cost of heat pumps. In December 2021, New York City passed into local law a mandate phasing out the combustion of fossil fuels in new buildings and accelerating the construction of all electric buildings. The law requires further study of the technical feasibility of heat pump technologies that can provide heat and hot water in new all-electric buildings. For each of these technologies, the PowerUp NYC team will pull from existing research and conduct new analysis as needed to understand a series of key questions. Is the technology capable of serving 100% of heating load during the coldest days of the winter? What are the costs to install the technology? What are the costs to operate the technology based on the forecast energy rates? What will be the environmental impacts of the technology, mostly in terms of reduced emissions? Confirming the fitness of existing technologies to satisfy the local law will provide the city with a clear path forward for decarbonizing new buildings at minimal cost and maximum benefit to owners and residents. Next up, building electrification, exploring and addressing affordability challenges. Reaching our climate goals will require many existing buildings to switch their heating and hot water systems from fossil fuels to clean electricity. It is imperative that this transition be planned appropriately so as to ensure it is affordable for all New Yorkers. The second building electrification research area study will focus on how to prioritize housing affordable to low-income residents in the building decarbonization transition. This study will look at a series of example buildings that are representative of the low-income housing stock and the barriers to decarbonization of these buildings. Some of the barriers included will be the need to remediate housing quality issues such as mold, failing envelopes, and pests before decarbonization, the possibility of high electric bills after switching from fuel to electric heating, and the upfront costs of heat pumps and weatherization. The study will identify the technology solutions best suited to overcome these barriers for each example, giving the city a roadmap for decarbonizing key low-income building typologies. The study will also estimate the total cost to decarbonize low-income housing and the fraction of this cost that cannot be covered by existing and anticipated federal, state, and utility programs. With this information, the PowerUp NYC team will identify strategies that the city can employ to shrink this remaining cost while preserving and improving housing quality. We will now pause for questions and comments. You may put your questions or comments in the Zoom chat or use the raise hand function, and we will call on you when it is your turn to speak. We ask that you keep your comments to under 1 minute so that everyone has a chance to share. All right, and with that, I'll pass it back to Linda to start the questions and comments session.
Don't see any questions at all in the comment section. Anybody raising their hand? Nobody. Doesn't look like we have any questions.
We have David Sorkin who would like to speak, so I'm going to unmute you right now.
Hi, thank you. So I think one of the concerns is, do we have the current infrastructure from the utility companies, in this case, Con Edison, to meet the needs? And will they have to expand significantly the infrastructure to be able to meet future expectations for electrification?
Claudia, do you mind taking that one? My audio was not working. I couldn't hear David's question.
Oh, sure. So thanks, David, for that question. It sounded like, just to repeat and make sure I understand, and for Zach's sake, you're thinking about how do we ensure that utilities like Con Edison have the infrastructure needed in order to accommodate the large amounts of electrification that we're anticipating for the energy transition. And I think that's a great question. We have a research topic that's focused on that question exactly. So we know that the majority of buildings are going to need to have some amount of energy efficiency and electrification in order to meet our decarbonization goals. But how do we do that in a way that's affordable is one of the research questions. And then the other one is, how do we do that in a way that doesn't stress the grid or cause unintended blackouts? So reliability is absolutely a top priority of our energy transition. So I think you raise a great point. And one of the research questions will look at that specific issue. So I don't know, Zach, if you want to jump in on more details for that research area.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's a key question about this transition. So heat pumps are known for being quite efficient. So we envision that on the cooling side in the summer, adding heat pumps is going to bring a lot of efficiency. The big concern about this transition is if you're using heat pumps for heating, you're adding a lot of electrical load during the colder seasons. And right now, the grid is designed really to serve the peak in the summer. Eventually, as we electrify more and more buildings, we envision that the peak was actually going to transition over to the winter. So right now, there's a lot of research being done to determine exactly when that will happen. The best guesses that I've seen right now are that's probably potentially around 10 years out. So what we're envisioning is that we need to get started, start understanding exactly where on the grid we're going to have those challenges. And the research that we're going to talk about later during this meeting will be specifically focused on, we know that adoption is not going to be uniform across the city. And also the effect, essentially what's called the headroom, or the amount of extra space that we have on the existing distribution infrastructure, that's not consistent across the city either. So we're going to try to put those two layers together and try to predict exactly where we envision problems first. And then Con Edison absolutely is going to be working on figuring out solutions to absorb the electrification load, not just from buildings, but also at the same time, we're talking about electrifying a lot of transportation too, with electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So absolutely one of the key questions of the energy transition. And we're hoping to tackle it in a few ways with this research.
Do we have any other questions? Razik?
Thank you. This is great. I just have a question. I know you guys noted a number of research questions. So the question I would like to pose is, within these considerations, are you guys considering the impact on ancillary aspects to the clean energy transition? And what I'm thinking of is, to the extent that we're increasing the cost of development of affordable housing, or we're increasing the cost to do business, are we also considering within the transition the effect that this would have on things like the overall prevalence of housing stock coming online and or displacement of jobs due to employers seeing overhead and looking at other ways and to make sure that they're maintaining their ROI?
Yeah, absolutely. So the second building electrification research project is really specifically focused on how electrifying buildings is going to make them more or less affordable. So what we're trying to get at with that research is determining exactly what incentives exist today and what would need to exist in order to make sure that this transition happens in a more just manner. So we're going to work to define what we consider to be kind of prototypical buildings and also prototypical residents that throughout the city will, as they electrify their buildings, the way that cost could potentially flow into rents, flow into the electricity bills. We want to look at all different ways that right now this potentially would be charged to people, and then determine exactly what the city can do to fill potential missing money, whether that be directly with some sort of tax incentive or through advocacy, meaning going to the state, to the utility, or to the federal government to increase incentives to help pay for the electrification transition. And then as it relates to jobs, we see it in a number of ways. One is obviously affordability could be a real concern. At the same time, there's a huge potential here to bring jobs to the city as we start to build these new electric systems, whether they be both at the building or the transportation level. So I envision there could be a job creation aspect to this as well. And there is some research being done outside of this project that is, I believe, going to be done by EDC, specifically focused on kind of what the green economy opportunities are and where they may exist and what sort of opportunities there are to attract new jobs to New York City as we build this out.
Okay. There was a question in the chat, but you partially answered that question. It talks about basically the cost being built in will it be built into city funding? Will it have to be approved at city council? I think some of those things are unanswered, I guess, at this point. And I know you kind of touched on incentives for, and this question is, will there be incentives for businesses, including Con Edison? But is there there's probably no answer on that at this point, but those things will be considered.
So there was a program called the Clean Heat Program, which just went on pause because it ran out of funding. So this is actually a very important topic right now. Con Edison has actually requested additional funding from the state, the ability to actually reuse funding that wasn't used for other purposes. So that's a pretty active discussion ongoing right now. My expectation is that there will be funding again for building electrification. We're just scratching the surface of the amount of buildings that we think are going to need to be electrified over the course of the next several decades to hit the climate goals. So this program is only a few years old. It's called the Clean Heat Program. If you're not familiar with it, we can send some information to you. But unfortunately, the program oversubscribed over the last several years and is now seeking new funding. And I think it's somewhere on, don't quote me, but I think it's somewhere around 400 million or so that they're asking for in this next tranche. So this is major investment in this initiative.
Okay, one last question, Marisol?
Yeah, two quick questions. Are there other cities or other states or cities that have, are we modeling after other cities or states that have done this program or have successfully implemented this type of program?
So when it comes to decarbonization, really worldwide, building electrification is seen as a central pillar. Now, different climates obviously have different solutions that are more or less applicable. I would say that New York and several other cold climates have been more cautious about proceeding with this because there was technical limitations in the past for heat pump technology. I don't think those exist any longer. So cold climate heat pumps and new heat pump technology has proven to be quite efficient at cooler temperatures like you'll see in New York City during the winter. There are other climates that it's much easier to push a heat pump technology in because you'll never hit the cold snaps. So a lot of the research we're going to be looking at is, as the temperatures drop, do we envision that the heat pumps perform in a way that keeps energy bills low? Because as the heat pump performs less efficiently, it uses more electricity and therefore it has a bill impact. So we're going to try to predict exactly what that bill impact is so we can look at a building owner and a resident, how that would affect how the heat pump is paid for, not only as a first cost, but as an operating cost going forward.
Okay, do you want to move to the next segment?
Yes, thank you. The next section is transportation electrification. Transportation electrification, strategically deploying electric vehicle charging using spatial mapping analysis to prioritize environmental justice goals. New York City's transportation sector is unique compared to most other cities. Here, New Yorkers walk and rely on public transit more than any other major city in the United States. Despite our reliance on public transit, there are more than 2.5 million light-duty vehicles registered in New York City. Decarbonizing the transportation sector will require replacing these vehicles that run on gasoline with clean alternatives. The predicted widespread adoption of new electric vehicles in the future will necessitate major investments in charging infrastructure. This research area study will help the city understand the best locations for those chargers. The project will have a specific focus on making charging infrastructure accessible in frontline communities and to rideshare service drivers. The study will use advanced analytics to predict where electric vehicles are likely to be adopted and will consider how income-eligible fundings could encourage electric vehicle adoption in neighborhoods that currently do not have many electric vehicles. The research will help New York City meet their 2030 goals by informing strategy and location for installations. The next topic is transportation electrification, preparing for New York City school bus electrification. New York City has ambitious goals for transitioning diesel school buses to electric buses by 2035. In partnership with the city, the New York City School Bus Umbrella Corporation, an independent nonprofit that will manage school bus operations, is pursuing an aggressive goal of having an all-electric school bus fleet by 2030 and becoming a model for electrified urban pupil transportation. To help achieve these goals, we will conduct research on key questions related to electric school bus adoption. Some areas of focus will be: what are the key barriers to school bus electrification for private companies and for the New York City School Bus Umbrella Corporation, and how can they be overcome? What approaches would maximize benefits to frontline communities, for example, by supporting the local workforce? What innovative and more affordable technologies might be available? And what funding opportunities might exist? The research findings will inform the city's action plan for electric school bus adoption. We will now pause for questions and comments. You may put your questions or comments in the Zoom chat or use the raise hand function, and we will call on you when it is your turn to speak. We ask that you keep your comments to under 1 minute so that everyone has a chance to share.
Let's see if we have anything. Nothing in the chat. Don't see any raised hands.
So
No.
I can share a few more comments just to maybe spark conversation on this topic. So we're really approaching this in two ways. So the first topic is really focused on the big picture question, which is right now there's millions of registered vehicles in New York City. If all those over time convert to electric, we need to start predicting where the charging infrastructure is going to be necessary. It's a very challenging thing to do, but there's lots of data on routes. There's lots of data on where charging infrastructure potentially could be installed today based on the ability of the grid to provide that electricity and that power. There's also really a focus of this research is figuring out, okay, what may potentially happen naturally and what sort of outcomes do we want? We don't want to have parts of the city that have what are quote unquote called charging deserts, where because there wasn't a demand, there wasn't charging infrastructure installed, which just further perpetuates the problem. So we're going to try to use some predictive analytics, which essentially is trying to determine what the propensity of a certain part of the city would be to install charging infrastructure. There's all sorts of variables we can put into the model to predict that, and then take a step back, look at the whole city and say, there's certain areas where we probably want the city to focus to make sure that we can make sure that there's a more equitable transition to electric infrastructure for vehicles. That's the first topic. The second topic is very squarely focused on the school bus fleet. These goals were passed recently. They're pretty significant. It's going to be a pretty quick acceleration. So we want to figure out what can we do to kind of catalyze that, make sure that happens quickly in the most cost-effective way. Lots of cities are trying to electrify their school bus fleets right now. Everybody's coming up against the same problem, which is that electric school buses are quite expensive. There's supply chain issues now, so there's going to be all sorts of thorny issues that we have to work through with this. But we have not only federal and state kind of muscle behind this, but we also have the city of New York really pushing out and saying it wants to do this itself. So there will be lots of funding, I envision, for these sort of initiatives, and we want to make sure that New York City gets it right and looks at all the opportunities that may exist and really take a focus on ways that we can bring local benefits in the process. So not only the public health benefits that I think we envision by electrifying these school buses as they're driving through our neighborhoods, but also potential opportunities to train up a workforce that can help build and service these buses over time as well.
We did get a question. The most significant issue with EV charging is the slow speed of charging. Do you see any improvements in the future tech of it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a field that every time you read a headline, there's more progress there, but there's lots of cost that comes with faster charging. And there's also a predictable effect on the grid. So unmanaged charging is a real concern about the transition to electric vehicles. What I do think is a great option here is school buses are a perfect use case in the sense that unlike maybe an Uber driver who is driving a 12-hour shift and really doesn't have time to stop and charge, school buses really are driving for just a few hours a day. So if you can orchestrate how the school buses operate and set up the charging in a way that kind of follows the natural flow of the school bus fleet, that's why they've become good candidates for electrification. We just need to find ways to get the cost of these down. So we're going to look at some interesting ideas that others are doing elsewhere in the country and try to figure out if those opportunities will work here in New York.
Okay, I have Richard Wander said he just has a note here that he has ideas. I don't know if you want to share them now, Richard, or do you want to send them afterwards? Are you there, Richard?
I can share them now. Let's see. I missed the beginning of the presentation, so I'm not sure what you covered. But as a homeowner, I'm interested in like incentives for decarbonizing my heating system, adding solar to my house. And right now, you know, if we want to meet these targets, then, you know, a lot of people need to do this conversion, but that's a lot to shell out for a homeowner. Only the homeowners who are really interested are going to, you know, make that investment. So I'm wondering if there's going to be like city programs or like a one-stop clearinghouse for like this is what you can do, this is the way to do it, this is the money that's available, etc. Um, uh,
Yeah, I absolutely hear you there, Richard. And there are a few resources that exist today. I think to get kind of at a similar point that I think you were alluding to, yeah, this is going to be big and expensive and need to move quicker than it is today. But actions that the city have taken thus far include the New York City Accelerator, which is essentially a one-stop shop to pull together the information that you may need to access those incentives. There's more than just city incentives that you can pull from there. As it relates to solar, there's opportunities to get federal tax incentives. The state via NYSERDA provides lots of incentives as well. So I would encourage you to start with the New York City Accelerator as a way to just get more information. And then a lot of the research that we're talking about tonight is focused on, are those incentives enough? And if they're not, what is it really going to take to achieve the climate goals, and what can the city start doing during this administration to get there? So it's really a two-part answer. There's some resources we can share with you, and we can direct you to where to find those. A part of this project is there's going to be a live website that will continually be updated with the progress of our work, but also there'll be information about resources that exist today. So nobody has to wait for the end of our research to go ahead and take action today.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Zach, for sharing that. Richard, I just wanted to also point you towards Electrify NYC, which is another program that New York City hosts that's specifically for residential homes, 1 to 4 family homes. The accelerator is a little bit more focused on larger buildings. So for your particular home, depending on what your setup is, you may be interested in the Electrify NYC, and the link is in the chat.
Okay. Does that cover commercial buildings as well, the accelerator?
The accelerator does. Electrify NYC is for residential.
Okay. All right. And the other thought I had was covering every large parking lot with solar panels. I've seen parking lots that have solar arrays over them, and it just seems like a win-win to shade the vehicles, cool the pavement, and generate electricity. And I'm wondering if there could be programs or incentives for businesses to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Solar canopies are something that lots of folks consider. There are different challenges with solar canopies. Lots of times, you have to provide access to, parking is quite sacred in New York. So there's going to be lots of parts of the city that just taking a little bit of square footage to build the canopies is going to be a non-starter. But there are lots of parts of the city that I think it's a good solution.
Yeah.
So we'll talk more later in this about research that's focused on public lands and how public lands can be better leveraged to help site clean energy infrastructure. And that could certainly be a look at solar canopies.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one question. Will the city consider talking to smaller businesses with fleets like florists, HVAC companies, plumbers, people that do, like in our borough, we have a lot of travel back and forth and we have a lot of congestion. And so we do have a lot of pollution from the vehicles. But it is very, again, like everything else, cost prohibitive, to purchase these types of vehicles. And I know some of the larger companies are looking at doing it, but will there be any kind of a dialogue with small businesses to see what kind of opportunity there may be for them?
Yeah, absolutely. On the business side itself, there are some pretty long-standing and lucrative programs that Con Edison runs. There's the Small Business Direct Install program, which over the years has started to now focus on some of the topics we're talking about tonight, not just efficiency, but also electrification incentives. And then as it relates to fleets and delivery vehicles and kind of medium duty vehicles, there's lots of research being done currently and being conceived by DOT. A few plans came out last year on how DOT envisions helping electrify some of those delivery vehicles throughout the city, because those are really the vehicles that are navigating through and meandering through our neighborhoods, polluting our neighborhoods, and also they're critical to our way of life. We need that, so we have to find a solution.
Very good. Okay, and do we want to move on to the next section?
Thank you, Linda. This next section will cover clean energy and the grid. Grid readiness, evaluating the reliability and resiliency of the city's grid under electrification scenarios. This research area study will examine the New York City grid's readiness in the face of demand growth as a result of widespread electrification. We will assess the impacts on New York City's electricity demand as the buildings and transportation sectors are electrified. For example, the research will identify the impacts of electric vehicle charging on citywide electricity consumption patterns. To ensure that the electric grid remains reliable while demand grows, we will also examine what new resources may be required in New York City in addition to the resources that are already under development. The research area will inform city strategies on ways to facilitate the acceleration of electrification while adopting practices to manage the impacts that electrification has on the New York City electric grid. By encouraging electrification in local areas where it does not place additional stress on the electric grid, and by incentivizing consumption during times of low demand. The next topic is energy storage, building utility-scale storage on non-city-owned land and as a strategy to replace fossil fuel power plants. This research area study will explore opportunities to build large-scale battery storage across the city. By charging during times of high renewable output and discharging during times of peak demand, storage can support the clean energy transition and help us reduce our reliance on fossil fuel-powered plants. We will first examine the impacts of new clean energy and transmission resources that are being developed in New York City and across the state, and how New York's clean energy transition will impact the amount that in-city fossil plants are operated. The research will then assess which fossil plants may become good candidates for replacement, and where the development of battery storage resources could be prioritized to support retirement or reduce usage of these fossil plants. The assessment will support city decision-making to incentivize clean energy development to deliver the greatest benefits to New York City communities, leading to reductions in carbon emissions and air pollution, including where there may be opportunities to deliver concrete outsized benefits for frontline communities. Next up, public land, leveraging city real estate to support more clean energy infrastructure. New York City government is the largest landowner in New York City, with thousands of buildings and land parcels across the 5 boroughs, including schools, public housing, and administrative buildings. This research area study will focus on how the city can use public real estate to support the interconnection of new clean energy resources, like solar, storage, and/or electric vehicle charging infrastructure. It will also explore how the city can design agreements regarding the use of this land to maximize community benefits, such as community ownership and/or bill discounts for frontline communities. While city agencies like the Department of Citywide Administrative Services and the Economic Development Corporation have already made significant strides towards deploying clean energy on public land, significant bureaucratic and legal hurdles remain if we are to scale up deployment at the pace necessary to meet our targets. The goal of this research would be to work collaboratively with city agencies to identify best practices and new programs that could overcome those hurdles and accelerate the development of local, community-owned energy on public land. We envision collaborations across several city agencies, as well as private developers, to explore what current barriers exist to developing energy infrastructure on city-owned property and viable solutions to accelerate the siting process. In addition, the study will explore how other New York State municipalities and government entities have leased and/or transferred property rights or provided access to their property for solar, storage, and electric vehicle charging development. The last topic of this section is in-city wind, mapping wind energy generation potential within the 5 boroughs. This research area study comes from Local Law 104 of 2018, which requires the mayor's office to perform an in-city wind energy assessment as a part of long-term sustainability plans. Built environment wind turbines, BEWTs, are constructed on, in, or near buildings. They present an opportunity for expanding distributed generation in a highly visible way. Yet technology is not as advanced as with more conventional turbine installations. Urban settings generally experience lower wind speeds and more turbulent air conditions. While there are successful examples, a number of urban wind turbines around the country have underperformed and gone over budget. It is important to understand the available resources to effectively guide future development. The research will bring together available wind mapping data and building height data to identify and map the areas of the city where wind resources are available for effective utilization. This will help the city identify opportunities for more detailed investigation and contextualize the possible technical limitations to keep in mind. We will now pause for questions and comments. You may put your questions or comments in the Zoom chat or use the raise hand function, and we will call on you when it is your turn to speak. We ask that you keep your comments to under 1 minute so that everyone has a chance to share.
Do we have any questions, comments? I see nothing in the chat.
While folks are thinking about this topic, I could just provide a few more kind of framing thoughts here in kind of more plain language, I guess. So these 4 topics are really focused on, we talked about electrification up front, and electrification is really only going to help us achieve our climate goals if the electricity that's supplying the buildings and the vehicles is clean. So all of these topics are focused on how we at the same time transition to have a clean, 100% clean electricity sector. So the city and the state are aligned here. There's very aggressive goals to get to 70% renewable energy by 2030 and 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040. So over the last several years, you've seen lots of announcements about new ways to do that. That's a combination of new transmission, meaning bringing bulk clean power into New York City from areas outside the city. There were some major announcements made about the city's commitment to purchase some of those renewable energy credits associated with that clean electricity. There's also major competition right now to develop offshore wind. And offshore wind is seen as a major source of clean energy that can serve downstate New York. And then also there's plenty of opportunity in city for renewable energy and energy storage to help absorb that renewable energy. So there's a lot to study here. We've broken it up into a few digestible pieces. The wind project is really to make sure that we're refreshing our knowledge of the opportunity for in-city wind, in addition to the work that's already been done offshore. The grid readiness study is really to say, okay, if we're really going to electrify lots of buildings and cars, are we going to in some way strain the grid beyond the ability for it to remain reliable and also at a really high cost? And then the other research kind of fills in the rest of the gap. So I don't want to take up all the time if folks have questions, but I wanted to just provide a little bit of framing to kind of weave those together. So I see David has his hand up.
David?
Yeah, this is a comment. So I think on the area of battery storage, that Staten Island, there's a lot of possibilities on Staten Island. The units that I've seen look like sort of tractor trailer boxes. They can be tucked behind buildings, around buildings, and whatever. But I was thinking about it, and they're kind of ugly. But what I was thinking about it is this could be an interesting private-public partnership where art groups could put murals on battery storage. So therefore, you've gotten an opportunity for storage at the same time, your beautification of a facility or parking lot or behind a building. So I was thinking about that recently. I'm working with a client that's thinking about battery storage, but they were so taken back by sort of having a couple huge big containers on their site.
Yeah, it's a great comment. The grid is largely, it's all around us, but it's hidden. And I think that's a real lost opportunity. Not only is it oftentimes, many think it's ugly, it's intentionally kind of hidden from plain view. So if we really want to get folks interested in this transition and really bought in, I think highlighting the infrastructure and making it more accessible, more beautiful is one way to absolutely do it. So personally, I was trained as an artist earlier in my career, so I absolutely endorse that, and I'll sign up to do a mural if we can get that pulled off.
Marisol, you had your hand up, or I see you took it down. Not sure if you had a comment. Guess not. Is there any, just another quick question, in terms of these battery storage facilities in communities, is there any negative to it in terms of, like, I remember when they were putting up all the towers for the cell towers for the phones, there was some community opposition. Is there anything, what is the status of the safety of these?
So this topic, we did our first town hall last night in Manhattan, and this same topic came up, and I think it's a real important one. So if you take the perspective of somebody that's trying to develop these systems, you know, they want to move a lot quicker. They want these things in the ground today. FDNY has really kind of led the country in trying to understand the safety of these systems, where you can put them. There's been a lot of concern that we want to make sure they're safe before we put them inside buildings. So there's lots of interest in understanding what the risks are. One of the things we're researching specifically with this energy storage topic is having them be placed in a way that they can replace the output of a in-city fossil plant. And that could be 100% replacement, meaning that you're able to shut down a plant because you've installed this utility scale power, and you're able to pull generation from somewhere else on the grid and store it locally. The other opportunity would be to just reduce the amount of times that these plants are running. So put in a smaller battery that's more economical, but get an equal or similar amount of public health benefits and reduced pollution by just offsetting the amount of run hours that these plants are operating. So yeah, it's a very good question. We will touch on it in this research, and I think any energy storage research needs to keep that front and center, because batteries are nothing new, but when you start to put them at this scale, you need to consider how they're going to be perceived, not only by the public, but what sort of risks they may have. We're looking a lot at the economics at this point, because we believe that there's a real opportunity for them, but we're going to have to study more what the safety issues are.
And just adding on to that, Zach, I thought that was a great summary. I would just add that FDNY and DOB have, like Zach said, some of the leading engineers in the country thinking about these issues, and any battery storage that is approved by FDNY and DOB has undergone very rigorous safety data analysis and testing before it was approved. So if there is a battery storage project coming near you or has been built near you, rest assured that if FDNY and DOB approved it, it is most likely very, very safe, just given how many layers of review the developer had to go through in order to get it built.
Okay. Any other questions on this segment? No? Last comment, we love offshore wind for Staten Island anyway, moving forward. So I guess we can move on to the next segment, Angel.
Yes, we can do that. Last but not least, the Renewable Rikers study, understanding the feasibility of constructing renewables and battery storage on Rikers Island. As many of you know, Rikers Island has long been a site of tragedy, but thanks in large part to the leadership and determination of community justice advocates, incarceration will be prohibited on the island after August 2027. This research area study will look at the technical feasibility for installing clean energy infrastructure on Rikers, including solar, storage, offshore wind interconnection equipment, and potentially innovative newer technologies like green hydrogen and geothermal district systems, as well as various options for ownership structures to ensure the benefits of clean energy infrastructure are distributed to frontline communities and communities most impacted by the legacy of Rikers. In addition to being shaped by the PowerUp NYC stakeholder engagement feedback, this research area will also be guided by the Renewable Rikers Advisory Committee, which is in the final stages of being formally appointed by the mayor and by city council. While the mayor's office has contracted a separate consultant team for the study, New York Power Authority, and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, the end result will be incorporated into the PowerUp NYC report. There may also be key opportunities to integrate assumptions and findings from this research area into, for example, the power plant replacement study, to ensure we are looking holistically at how Rikers may be able to contribute to the city's broader energy goals. Ultimately, the study will inform a broader master planning process that will be held regarding the future of Rikers and ensure decision makers and community leaders are equipped with a better understanding of what is possible. We will now pause for questions and comments. You may put your questions or comments in the Zoom chat or use the raise hand function, and we will call on you when it is your turn to speak. We ask that you keep your comments to under 1 minute so that everyone has a chance to share.
Any questions or comments? I don't see any raised hands. Zach, you want to add to it again?
I can add to it this time.
Okay, buddy.
I'm happy to jump in. So I think this Renewable Rikers energy study is really, really exciting one to imagine the possibilities of what the future of Rikers could be, not only to ensure that Rikers has a more just future, but also just the fact that it's so unusual for in New York City, 400 acres to open up, 400 acres of space to open up for new possibilities all at once. The Department of Environmental Protection is also moving forward a feasibility study to see whether a consolidated wastewater resource recovery facility could be built on Rikers and help close and consolidate for other plants in the across the city and the other boroughs. And those could all be combined into one potential plant located on Rikers. So that study is ongoing simultaneous to this one, and we're in close coordination with DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, on that. And this study is really going to be looking at, based on different assumptions of how much space on Rikers we could dedicate to clean energy infrastructure, how much energy could be generated, and how could that contribute to our general energy transition goals for the whole city. So we'll be looking at solar, we'll be looking at energy storage, we'll be looking at opportunities to interconnect offshore wind and see if that makes sense from a transmission perspective to bring clean energy into the city there. For those who are unaware, offshore wind has, big cables connecting it to the city under the ocean, but where it lands, you need to have a converter station that will convert the power into something that's usable and can be injected into the grid. And that usually takes up several acres of space. And that several acres of space can be hard to come by in New York City. So this offers an opportunity to look at whether that might be a useful use of the land on Rikers. So those are just some of the ideas that we're going to be looking at as part of this study. Happy to answer any questions if folks have them.
Very interesting. Any questions, comments? Any broader comments that anybody has about anything that came to their mind after each segment that they'd like to make? Okay, I don't see anything. So Angel, it's good to, okay to close?
Yeah, if no one has any questions, I will show next steps. And then in the meantime, if questions come up, please feel free to drop them in the chat.
And I know that there's a survey link that you want to share in the chat also. So we encourage everybody to fill out that survey and provide comments there as well.
Next steps. We encourage everyone to submit their questions and comments online. Our survey is available in English, Spanish, traditional and simplified Mandarin, Bengali, and Nepali. You can access these surveys by using their respective links on the right. Simply copy and paste the link into your search engine, and it should take you to a page that looks like this. The survey should take no more than 5 minutes, and we appreciate you taking the time to share your feedback and comments with us. You can visit our website using the link below or by scanning the QR code with your phone. On our website, you can sign up for our newsletter and stay updated on the progress of the research study, as well as find out when the next community town halls will be held. The survey links, session recordings, and other materials will also be available on the website shortly.
Thank you. So I just really want to close by thanking everyone for attending the Staten Island Power Up New York City session. It's really important that each borough provides their feedback. So I know it's nighttime, dinner time for everybody. So appreciate you jumping on. Appreciate the kinetic team and the mayor's team for all of your wonderful comments and the work that you've been doing with this. Just want to close with saying that there is going to be, from what I understand, a community town hall that we'll be facilitating again in the fall. We'll keep you apprised of that. If you would like to find out more about this project, or if you want to just look at our website, sichamber.com, we'll have periodic information on it as well, or you can email myself or anyone on our website, and we'll make sure that you're on the list so that we share future opportunities, survey links, opportunities for feedback or information on that fall town hall meeting. So I really would like to thank everybody for taking part in tonight's meeting. It's very, very important. So have a wonderful evening. Any final comments? Give you a last chance. Thank you all for coming. Nope, we're good. All right, wonderful. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good evening.